Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell, and I am very excited to be here with you today to talk Club World Cup, in which Chelsea and their 6,000 players managed to get past Fluminense and book their spot in the finals. Meanwhile, PSG and their 6,000 goal scorers managed to get past Real Madrid and do the same. Here with me to talk it all out is Joe Maresca. Ooh, another clever name, Joe. You are on fire this week, my friend.
I like how, Taylor, you wait until we're actually going and doing the recording to check the name for the first time and do it on the fly. Yes. What if I left it just as my own regular boring name and then you had to pivot last minute? You're really putting a lot of faith and trust in me.
I would find a way around it or make one up and do a very poor job of it. I've tried 2 days in a row now to come up with one for Graham and failed spectacularly. Graham Ruthven Chelsea Nino. Nailed it. Graham, hello.
Absolute cracker, Taylor Rockwell. Yeah. People have been trying for 33 years. I think it's going to take a little bit longer on that basis.
I gotta say, filling in for Ryan Bailey as host this week, I am greatly appreciative of the two of you willing to roll with the yes and when there is no business rolling with the yes and to some of the stuff that I've led you in with.
Just pull a FIFA and get Michael Buffer to do the Michael Buffer thing like he did before these semi-finals, and we'll be grand.
That hasn't been a thing this tournament, right? Like, because I've watched sparingly, I've seen the player walkouts wrestling style. They went full on with it, Graham.
They just leaned directly into it. They just got rid of all subtlety, which is this tournament's brand, quite frankly.
That man gets paid so much money for 30 seconds to a minute's worth of work. But
yes, he does.
He delivers every single time, unlike Real Madrid against PSG. Shall we start there, Mr. Ruthven, with PSG's emphatic, impressive, comprehensive victory over Real Madrid?
Yeah, I mean, they're just so good, aren't they? Like, I kind of thought that coming into this tournament, they lose to Botafogo in the group stage, of course, and at that point, I thought they had maybe lost a step in some of their intensity. Since then, they've just absolutely demolished the entire tournament, and with Chelsea coming on Sunday in the final, I think there's a chance that they will do the same to them as well.
Yeah, I've enjoyed how the coverage has sort of already anointed PSG as the best club on the planet right now, having won the Champions League, and then many of them have sort of been like, yes, there was still an hour to play against Real Madrid, and yes, there's a final against Chelsea, but they're the best team on the planet. Joe, any disagreement with that right now?
Well, I mean, it doesn't take a lot of effort to anoint PSG as that, given that they were crowned that, like, effectively month and a half ago, whenever that Champions League final was.
Yeah, wait, I mean, are you saying that the Champions League is better than the Club World Cup?
This is
breaking news for Gianni Infantino.
We don't know whether it's better. We don't know if it's better than the Conference League, though. That's what Sunday is. If the Super Cup is the Europa League versus the Champions League, I don't know what we're going to call this Chelsea v PSG game. We'll find out once and for all.
We don't. We don't know yet. Really, this is breaking new ground and ground that needed to be broken. Certainly, that's one thing we can all agree on. People of the world unite. I mean, it's so clear to see with PSG. Right now, we saw it in that demolishing of Inter. We saw it well before that in the Champions League final last year. I mean, they are an amazing team, and it is to their credit that they have not dropped intensity more than any other team has dropped intensity this summer, because I think there is undoubtedly like a slightly lesser speed of play that we're seeing across some of these games. When they're being played in the middle of the afternoon in the summer, I don't think that's a huge shock either. But PSG have maintained more of their core identity than most teams this summer. And they're playing really, really good ball. Like, you have to squint to see the drop-off. It's not clear to see. And you see it at times in results. Graham mentioned the Botafogo game. Some rotation as well. Like, there are reasons for them in the way that they've made this run. But, man, the contrast between them as a team that clearly has an identity, that has a ton of continuity, and that has real buy-in and belief across the entire squad, the contrast between that and Real Madrid yesterday, set aside the mistakes, which kind of ruined the game, right, effectively. Even if we set those aside and just ignore them and pretend that Real Madrid didn't do them, there was still a huge difference between how these two teams conducted themselves in this game.
Yeah, the quarterfinal that PSG played was actually a competitive game. Bayern were actually able to match PSG for a lot of that game, and Joe, that maybe comes back to what you're saying about Bayern being much clearer and surer of like their identity. They've had a year under Vincent Kompany. Real Madrid are still in this phase of transition under Xabi Alonso and with the new signings as well. But yeah, Bayern, they were able to hang it for much of that quarterfinal. Donnarumma had to make a couple of big saves, and Bayern, they did pose a threat in a way that Real Madrid never did. And of course, there's the Jamal Musiala injury at the end of the first half as well, which I think played a role in like shaking Bayern. So there was mitigating factors to them going out, but man, Real Madrid were just played off the pitch comprehensively. I mean, this game is done after it goes 2-0. There's just no way to envisage them coming back from that.
So that's the confusing thing, I think, from a viewing perspective, and then trying to find some analysis within this game, is that, like, Joe, to your point, Real Madrid, not very good, which is an understatement for a few of their players. At the same time, when you gift this PSG team 2 goals inside the first 9 minutes, it's sort of difficult for me to know then, like, what actually is their ability at this point, what is their style, how much have they embraced Xabi Alonso's kind of approach so far, because those individual mistakes just put them into such a hole so quickly.
Yeah, it makes analyzing Real Madrid difficult. And this summer, really, with Kylian Mbappe not yet making his first start until this game in the semifinals, that's a huge question. How is Xabi Alonso going to get Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. into this team together in a functional way? Spoiler alert, it didn't happen in this game, and we'll get to more of that later on. How is he going to fit Trent Alexander-Arnold into this team? Well, no Trent Alexander-Arnold in this game because he picked up a little knock in training prior to the match. So, yeah, it's not a great 90-minute stretch for collecting data about the Xabi Alonso experiment, and that was the thing that maybe of all things this summer I was most looking forward to when it came to watching some of these big European teams that we'd just seen play. Like, we weren't going to learn a ton more about PSG in this tournament, effectively. We could learn a lot about Real Madrid, and we have learned some things throughout the tournament so far. But this game, where you're giving the ball to PSG twice in the first 9 minutes of the match, this is not a game where those things are really going to be all that helpful.
Yeah, there were some good things from Real Madrid at this tournament. Obviously, this 90 minutes was just a nightmare for them. At the risk of being a contrarian, I'm not that worried about Real Madrid, and actually think they come out of this competition fairly positive. Or Alonso will feel like he's got evidence on a number of things. I mean, the first thing is PSG are just so good. We've already covered that already. They've just demolished their way through every tournament that they've played recently. And I don't know whether it was realistic to expect Real Madrid to be up to that level after just a few games under Alonso, considering the team they were last season, how they finished things under Ancelotti. Having said that, Dean Huijsen being suspended for this game was huge because of how important he'd been to Real Madrid playing out from the back. I blue-skied about this after the Dortmund game. I couldn't quite remember who they played in the quarters there. But there were 3 or 4 passes he played in that game that were unbelievable. He is clearly their most press-resistant defender, and they certainly could have used that against PSG, given the mistakes that Asensio and Rudiger make in the first 10 minutes of this game. So I think he improves Real Madrid in this match. He's suspended. He gets a needless red card in the last few minutes of that Dortmund game. I think Real Madrid paid for that. And as Joe mentioned, Trent doesn't play this game either due to an injury that he got in training. That has a real knock-on effect for this game because it moves Fede Valverde to right back. You then you lose him in the middle. He'd been brilliant in that role at this tournament. It then means Tchouaméni has to go into central midfield, which then moves Real Madrid out of the back 3 that they had used in their last few games. The knock-on effect of that is on Arda Güler in central midfield, who had been outstanding as this pace-setting midfielder, a kind of player that I never envisaged that he would be, but he played maybe 3 or 4 excellent games in that position at this tournament. But he doesn't quite have the physicality yet to be that complete central midfielder for this team. So he needs Valverde alongside him, almost as a bodyguard. And in this game, he's just not. He was just overwhelmed. Arda Güler and Real Madrid as a team were overwhelmed. Where I think Alonso compounded all of this was by starting. He didn't need to do this. He starts Vinicius, Mbappe, and Garcia, when really probably only 2 of them should have played in this shape. And what I like about Xabi Alonso is after this game, he held his hands up and he said, yeah, that was a mistake. So I have to. From that, you have to assume that he's not going to make that mistake again, and he's not going to play 3 forwards in this team. But I have seen enough at this tournament to feel that Alonso will find solutions because he's already making me think about certain players differently. Fran Garcia, for example, coming into this window, Real Madrid were looking at left-backs, and they probably will still sign a left-back, but I thought Fran Garcia was a dud for this team. He had an excellent tournament taken yesterday out of the equation, which I kind of am in my analysis of Real Madrid. He's had an excellent tournament playing in that back 3 where he doesn't have the same sort of defensive duties. He can get forward. In that game against Dortmund, there's a goal where Real Madrid go from Trent on the right side to Fran Garcia on the left side, and it was like, Leverkusen live on. This is a Xabi Alonso team where you've gone from one right back to the left back or the left wing back or whatever. So I still think there's enough evidence to say Alonso is... I count on him to find solutions for this team more than Ancelotti. I'll put it that way.
I think that's a fair point, Graham, except for the part where you said taking yesterday out of the equation. And if we include the 4-0 loss in the equation, it's harder for me to see yesterday as a sign of positivity and a sign of Xabi Alonso figuring some things out, because it feels like there are still a lot of the looming questions that we weren't really sure about heading into this tournament coming out of this tournament.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Graham. You go ahead. You go.
I was going to say, I think that's entirely fair, but my gauge was never PSG coming into this tournament. Like, PSG are at the level where I watch PSG now, and this happens every so often, it happens every few years, where it's like you will see a team and you think to yourself, I don't know how anyone's going to better them. PSG are at that level, and inevitably, it happens. I felt it with Man City a few years ago when they win the treble. Physically, they drop off. That's how they're able to be caught. So it does happen. It will happen. PSG will be beaten at some point. But right now, watching how they're playing, I just don't think anyone in the world is up to that level. So it would be unrealistic for me to expect Real Madrid to be up to that level. And in the previous games, I still think there was enough there to be positive about the process that they've started.
And also to extend a hand to Real Madrid here, I don't think we can really look at the scoreline of this game as a fair summary of where Real Madrid is as a team. Like they handed the ball to PSG 2 times. I said it again, I'll say it one more time. The Asensio mistake is horrible, the Rudiger mistake is horrible.
It would have been better if they'd handed it to them, because then at least it would have been a set piece instead of a breakaway in on goal.
Yeah, it was bad, right? So all of those things happened in this game, and that's not going to happen to Real Madrid again, right? Like Rudiger is a grown man, professional soccer player who's one of the best in the world at his position. We've talked about the Huijsen, thing where he's absent from this game, and that really does hurt Real Madrid. That's clear. The area, Graham, where I am worried about Real Madrid, like seriously worried about Real Madrid, is actually the same area where I've been worried about Real Madrid for a while. And maybe that means that I shouldn't be that worried about it, because it's still been one of the best teams on the planet. Pressing. You're absolutely right. It's the third goal. Like, forget the first 2. Like, I'm completely willing to toss it out of the equation. I don't, honestly, like, those goals are not going to keep me up at night. They should not keep Real Madrid fans up at night. It happens. Move on. The third goal is where it starts to get concerning. And it is a dazzling bit of possession from PSG, where they're building from the back. It is like, I don't know why this is why my brain always goes. Do you guys know that Arsenal team goal that always gets brought up in, like, the goals of the century? Yeah, it's like ping, ping, ping. And it's like the soccer is art kind of moment for me. This goal is kind of like that goal, where it ends up happening in a different way because there's space to exploit in behind the back line to a greater degree than that Arsenal goal that I'm thinking about. But PSG build from the back, they play through, and it ends just so exquisitely with those last couple of passes, and it really does end with Fabian Ruiz putting the ball in the back of the net, and it's one end of the field to the other. If you go back and really watch this sequence, there's all sorts of really clever things that PSG do to create extra space between the lines. More than that, they just take advantage of a blatant lack of effort from 2 players on the field for Real Madrid. And I'm not going to give anybody any money if they guess them, because it's obvious who those players are. It's Kylian Mbappe and it's Vinicius Jr. Vinicius Jr. does nothing to block the very blockable passing angle with his cover shadow into midfield. Like, this is egregious stuff that gets someone who's not Vinicius Jr. benched. Like, it's bad. And then Kylian Mbappe, I don't know if he ones up Vinny Jr. in this moment, but he's right on par. Kylian Mbappe makes the most half-hearted, like quarter-hearted, is that an expression we can start? He makes a quarter-hearted closing run in the press, and it's like, it's pretend defense from both of those players. Like, it is made to look, sort of, they're not that convincing, but it's made to look as though they're kind of trying, when there's just so clearly not. They have done, honestly, like, they did nothing. They could have been close to mannequins, and Real Madrid in this sequence would have had the exact same pressing efficiency. PSG break through the lines, and they score at the other end. And that is the reason I'm concerned about Real Madrid, because Xabi Alonso's big task is to figure out a way to get those players on the field to do it effectively. And oh, by the way, to do that while also integrating a pretty poor defensive right back in Trent Alexander-Arnold, who is not the poster boy of effective 1v1 defending, of effective defending in space, which is what pressing teams ask of their defensive players. So that is why I'm worried. And I prefaced all this by saying Real Madrid had been bad at this for a while. They were a very poor pressing team under Ancelotti. The thing is, it seemed to me at times that they knew that about themselves, and they sat a little bit deeper. And I am wondering when Xabi Alonso will decide to do something similar, or if he'll have to, and in the meantime, how weird things could get for Real Madrid. So they're going to be fine, all things considered. But are they optimized? No, not at all. And we saw that in this game, because there was a clear difference between PSG's pressing intensity and Real Madrid's, and I don't think that difference is going away anytime soon.
Do we think UEFA will do their job and make sure that these two meet in the phase-inning, or do we think they'll hold out for the knockout round of the Champions League?
Phase-inning, absolutely. Any chance you have to hype up the phase-inning, the phase, semicolon, the phase-inning part 2, you have to do it.
I just look forward to the draw when somebody reaches in and is like, no, not that one, not that. There's the cold one. Okay. Oh, it's PSG and Real Madrid. Who could have seen this coming? I'm very excited for that game because I'm very excited to see how Xabi Alonso, but I think how he makes this team work and kind of what response he is able to get, because that's how it's gone for him at Leverkusen. It's a big task for him to get some of these names and some of these reputations in line and playing the style that he wants. And so I think maybe this is a good sort of test case for what's to come and what needs to happen. I promise this isn't meant to be as snarky as it's going to sound, Graham. Do you think Real Madrid regret paying the $10 million for Trent Alexander-Arnold to get him into this tournament, for him to have to miss this game with injury, or do you think it was worth it to get the reps and kind of get a little bit of experience under his belt in the preseason?
I wouldn't say it was worth it. I mean, the first game against Al Hilal, he has a bad game. Alonso's still trying to figure out what he offers in this team. Kind of pushes him into the middle in a box midfield as like a right-sided defensive mid. Very quickly abandons that, goes to the back three, plays him high on the right, which was always his position. It's not like we learned anything new about Trent Alexander-Arnold in those games. And he was good in those games. Like I think he's going to be an important player for this team. But then he misses the most consequential game that has a knock-on effect on how the rest of the team shapes up. So yeah, not worth that €10 million. But I think Real Madrid will be fine, given that's probably like half of a Taylor Swift concert at the Bernabeu this summer.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about PSG when we preview the final and their opponent Chelsea. We're going to come back and talk about Chelsea's win over Fluminense back soon. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. I said we were going to Chelsea Fluminense, but first, Graham, shall we spend some time with Luka Modric?
Yeah, his last game for Real Madrid, his deal to AC Milan has essentially been done for a number of weeks now, and lo and behold, it's been reported today that he's going to be presented by the end of the week as an AC Milan player before he goes away on his vacation, on his holidays. I just think it's notable. We should probably mention, that this is his last game for Real Madrid, because I think he is in the conversation for being one of the best midfielders of all time. For me, it's him and Iniesta. Just because of how varied their skill set was. He has been so important to Real Madrid for such a long time, and his longevity might actually give him the edge for me over Iniesta. I think Iniesta was like a purer player, but Modric could maybe do a little bit more and has a little bit more progression in his career, where he starts off as like this like high number 10, edge of the box, making runs into the box, and then gets deeper and deeper and deeper until he's sort of almost a bit like a Xavi-esque figure for Real Madrid. And Real Madrid will have to do a much better job of replacing him than they did Toni Kroos last season, because that really compromised their entire campaign. I mentioned in the first segment that Alonso is experimenting with Arda Güler as that player. He's been really good in matches in that role. Also isn't the complete package and needs to add physicality to his game to be a Modric replacement. So interesting to see who they target or who they identify within their squad to be that player, because it's going to be important.
Who will Modric be playing with at AC Milan? What's the most likely midfield now that they've had Reinders gone? I don't know where João Felix is at this point. Is it Modric and 2 question marks for AC Milan?
Musa? Did Yunus Musa get a move before that?
Hopefully. Luka Modric has an incredible midfield trio with him at Croatia, had one at Real Madrid. Milan's going to be interesting. Let's get Christian Pulisic central, Yunus Musa central. They can learn a thing or two from Luka. I look forward to Milan this season. Anytime we get to see more of Luka Modric, who will never age, I am good with it. Graham, we also have Chelsea in the Club World Cup final. They get past Fluminense 2-0. 2 goals from João Pedro, who... Both times, the second one at least has to kind of have that half-second memory of like, oh, right, I'm not celebrating. Because he gets up after an emphatic goal, does a quick little sprint, and then it's like, oh, no, wait, never mind, I'm good. I'm not celebrating. But he could have, because it was 2 well-taken goals, not a bad way to get going for Chelsea in the Club World Cup.
Yeah, what a debut. That first goal in particular is just such a thunderbolt, and gets Chelsea ahead in this game and creates a game state that Fluminense were never able to recover from. They were never able to impose themselves on this match. Even when they're chasing, it never really felt like they were able to create much. And even beyond the goals, I think we got a real indication of why Chelsea wanted Pedro in this game, because he gives them a different option. He can obviously play across the forward line. We've seen him play as like a second striker for Brighton. We've seen him play in a wide position for Brighton as well, so that's part of the attraction of him for Chelsea. But he can also play as a number 9, and that's where he plays in this game, but he is a different kind of number 9 to Delap and Jackson, the two strikers that Chelsea already have. Both of them want to play in the shoulder of the last defender, particularly in Liam Delap's case, or at least from what I've seen from him for Ipswich Town last season. Pedro, on the other hand, he has the tendency to drop deep. And Maresca, after this game, spoke about how important he was, or how important he thought this was, against a low defensive line like Fluminense were employing in this game. And that was a scenario that Chelsea struggled to handle a lot of last season. So to me, it seems like they are trying to build an attacking group where they have different options depending on the task. So they have these quick transition players like Delap and I guess Pedro Neto, who I've not always been Pedro Neto's biggest fan, but he's had a good tournament at the Club World Cup. But they've also got other players who can stand up defenders, like Jamie Gittins, who was statistically the best dribbler in the Bundesliga last season. I have to imagine that's why they've brought him in. They've brought in João Pedro, who is a great manipulator of space, and his movement is really smart. So I have questions over, at some point this is going to have to solidify for Chelsea into some form of strongest team to allow them to build cohesion and chemistry. But I think we've seen at this tournament that, well, we've seen some things come together for Chelsea, but we've seen how they want to be as an attacking group, and they want to have those different options. And Pedro, certainly with his 2 games, gave them that, and 2 goals gave them that in this match.
Have you enjoyed the Chelsea approach of just continuing to add players during the competition? Is that a thing that we'll see from them throughout the season? Man. In October, they'll just sign 2 new strikers as needed?
I have. Can any of you guys remember something similar to that? Like mid-tournament players just arriving. I think Jamie Gittins is going to be there. Yeah, maybe
that's the Gold Cup crack right there. That's how it is.
Oh yeah, I forgot you can replace players after the group stage. Yeah. That is always an enjoyable one. But no, at club level, I don't think we've seen one player exit the competition with his club and then sign with another club still in the competition. Gittins cannot play in the Club World Cup though, right? Or have they relaxed that rule too?
I think he can. Oh, because he came from Dortmund, right? Is that? Yeah. I don't even know. I hadn't considered that. I thought he was.
What do you mean? Because I meant because he's already played in the tournament. Do you think there's a Dortmund clause of no, he came from Dortmund, he can't play in the tournament?
No, that's what I meant. Because he's come from another team in the tournament. He's training with them, so Chelsea might not know if that rule exists in this competition.
I thought that post-match interview with Enzo Maresca was really interesting, Graham, and I picked up that same bit about João Pedro, and his willingness to drop between the lines as being something that Maresca and Chelsea found really attractive. On the note of adding players midway through the tournament, I thought Maresca had another interesting comment about how João Pedro, and the story is he's on the beach, just enjoying his offseason, when he gets the call and the move to Chelsea starts happening at rapid speed, and he ends up then flying to the U.S. and playing for Chelsea and starting and scoring goals for Chelsea. Maresca said something to the effect that, we think that João Pedro was maybe even a little bit more well-rested for this tournament, and that was a real help for him. Yeah. Maybe that's something we'll have to look at more in the future. I don't think he was talking about, we're going to change our transfer strategy to only sign players halfway through a tournament. Instead, I do think that it is part of a much broader conversation about the Club World Cup, that coaches are, now that they've experienced it once, for the most part, right, only a few games left, now that they're most of the way through this, a few games left, nice work on my part, 1 game left. Now that they're this far through the tournament, I think they're sort of understanding what it takes to add this on to everything else. And I do think we're going to see teams continue to evolve how they look at this competition, how the competition itself is going to evolve to accommodate some of the power players. And by that, I mean the big clubs and power stakeholders across this sport. I just thought that interview was interesting, along with the fact that Chris Richards was on the desk for DAZN for these couple of games. I loved Chris Richards. I enjoyed his thoughts. He brought some good defensive knowledge to the table. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Joe, do you have any thoughts on how they would evolve things, how they would accommodate those bigger players, or do you think it's more so this becomes a glorified preseason friendly sort of thing?
I don't have a lot of thoughts on it, Taylor. I do think we're going to see managers be more willing to rotate more often. I do think now that some coaches are going to come out of this thinking, yep, that was a lot, and it maybe wasn't quite worth it for the things that we want to accomplish. Obviously, the money at the end of the tunnel is massive, and that is the thing that has kept so many teams playing so many of their biggest players. But I do think we're going to see some teams start to realize where and when they can rotate and do that a little bit more often. And I don't know the sports side behind it. I thought Maresca's comment was interesting because I would have kind of thought the opposite, that it would be difficult for João Pedro to come in, not having probably done the same amount of fitness work in the last couple of weeks. But Maresca seemed to think it was the other way around, or at the very least wanted to use that as an example for maybe some larger case that he's building about how hard it is for his players to have to play 97,000 games in a season.
I do want to talk a bit more about how Chelsea actually played in this game and the tactical setup and approach, but maybe we can do that with an eye towards the looming final. In the meantime, I wanted to ask you both about Fluminense, who are obviously the last South American team remaining in this competition. So we do end up getting the Europe versus Europe final that we thought we might get. We did at least get one South American entrant in the semifinal, which is more than I thought we would get at this stage in the competition. Do we feel like Fluminense were the most memorable South American side, or do you all have another one or another couple that will loom larger in your memory?
Graham, wait, how many do you have? Because there's two that come to mind for me.
It's got to be Flamengo for Graham.
Yeah, okay, that's the
Flamengo were the best South American team, and I'm sad that they ran into Bayern Munich so early in the tournament. Because in terms of, and look, this is how knockout football works. You don't always get the four best teams in the semi-finals, but you could have placed them in the semi-finals, and I mean they beat Chelsea in the group stage. They kind of demolished them 3-1. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen them making a deeper run. And then I guess, we've got to give some flowers to Botafogo beating the European champions, beating the team that have just demolished Real Madrid 4-0. And yeah, PSG were maybe off their game on that day. But Botafogo were a better Atletico Madrid at this tournament than Atletico Madrid, who they knock out of the group stage. And I wasn't expecting that from Botafogo because I know they're the South American champions. They win the double last year, winning the Brazilian title as well. They've had a serious drop-off this season. I think they're 8th in the domestic league, so I didn't expect them really to be competitive at all. But they were, and players like Igor Jesus has already got a move to Nottingham Forest on the back of his tournament. So, yeah, I think those were the two most memorable Brazilian teams. Joe, would you agree with that? Is there anyone else?
Absolutely. And Fluminense has still had a great run. The only other one that was coming to mind for me in a real concrete way is Boca, for that Boca-Benfica game and how much fun that game was. But really, when we look back at this tournament, the thing that I'm going to remember are these cross-continental games, right? I think those have been the best offering of this tournament. I think a lot of people would probably hold to that same idea. We just don't get those games outside of a competition like this. And yes, there are flaws with the Club World Cup. Yes, there are challenges. Yes, there are things that probably need to be ironed out to a greater degree. But that is a legit fun thing that has enhanced my experience over the last month or so watching these games. And I think that is worth building around. If this competition is going to continue to exist, I want as many of those as possible. I'm not advocating for a format change, but I want to keep seeing those kinds of games. When I think back on this tournament, those are the ones I'm going to remember. That Benfica-Boca game, the Miami-Porto game, the Botafogo-PSG game that we already talked about. Here's a non-Americas version, but the Mamelodi Sundowns-Dortmund game that ends 4-3. So many of those games that were kind of just off their rocker. And Fluminense deserves credit as being the furthest advancing team from the field, effectively, because that's what this tournament always was. It was Europe versus the field. And I got a ton of respect for Fluminense. Even how they approached this game, they were man-marking quite a bit across the back line. They had Thiago Santos, who is not a spring chicken. He's 35 years old, somehow still only the 4th oldest player in the starting 11 for Fluminense in this game, which is a wild stat, by the way. He was playing as a left-sided center back in really what was like a 3-4-1-2 setup for Fluminense in this game, and he was regularly stepping all the way to the midfield stripe when Fluminense were back in their own third, defending in a low block. To follow Cole Palmer or Christopher Nkunku, you had Bernal and Hercules in midfield doing a bunch of man-oriented defending as well. And Chelsea had some trouble with it. Their goals come from transition in this game. They don't come from them carefully breaking down this, man-oriented lower block from Fluminense. It was more brute force stuff of we're going to force turnovers and we're going to go and find chances at the other end. Despite their best efforts, they didn't create a ton. They created some, but not a ton of really clear-cut chances in their sustained possession play, Chelsea. And it was fun to see some of these teams from not Europe not get their doors blown off and at times actually mount real games against these teams.
And in this game, there was one player who was in the Chelsea team. Chelsea qualified for this tournament by winning the 2021 Champions League. There was one player from that Chelsea team on the pitch in this game, and it was Thiago Silva, which is a fact that I loved. He's playing for the opposition team.
Their second oldest player, right, in the starting
Correct.
11. It goes Fabio,
the goalkeeper, yeah.
Thiago Silva, then German Cano. Is he the third?
Wow. Well done.
That's outstanding, Fluminense.
Yes,
Good
it
stuff.
is.
Giving us old heads hope.
And it's interesting because Fluminense are not the only team that fit into this bucket, but really when I think back to some of those cross-continental games and really the European teams versus the field, the biggest difference that I think we saw over and over and over again was not the technical quality. Yes, there is a gap there. Like, generally speaking, the transfer market's efficient enough that the most technical players rise to the top, the ones who can play the best passes, who can turn out of space with the most efficiency, all that stuff. It wasn't really the technical gap, though, that popped for me. It was the physical gap, where in this game, Chelsea pressed Fluminense and had a lot of success doing that, where Fluminense really couldn't build a ton out of the back. They didn't have a lot of success playing through these intricate passing combinations, even though they tried for stretches. Then they moved to playing more direct balls, and they didn't have a lot of success corralling those either. It looked like Chelsea were playing at like 1.25 speed to Fluminense in this game, and that's something that we saw even when we got like the Chelsea LAFC game earlier on in this competition, and we talked about that pretty in depth on this show. That's where the difference is, where all these players, even Cole Palmer, like somebody who is slight and kind of built like a scarecrow a little bit, right? He's an athlete. There's a moment in this game where he holds off like 3 dudes on a counterattack. And it is unbelievable stuff from a player that you don't really, at least when I think of Cole Palmer, I don't think physical specimen. And yet you do see just how impressive these players are at the highest levels. And I think we saw that from the best players all the way throughout this tournament.
I think Mensa levels public speaker. That's what I think of when I think of Cole
Well, it depends
Palmer.
if he has the trophy tucked into his shorts, whether I think of him as a physical specimen or not.
I love him so much. All right, let's talk a bit more about Chelsea in just a second. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about their performance and what we expect from them versus PSG in the final. Back soon. Welcome back, everybody. Joe, coming to you for this one. You talked a little bit about the physicality and intensity differences in Chelsea versus Fluminense. What did you notice from Chelsea on the tactics side of things?
Yeah, they pressed out of an aggressive 4-4-2 in this game, had a lot of success with that. They could afford to be more aggressive in this match against a team that we've established is quite old and is not a massive threat on the counter. So they did push numbers forward, perhaps more.
Joe, they're very experienced.
My mistake. Mature, wise,
Thank
experienced, elderly, aged. Oh, I lost it.
Wait, now, hold on.
I had it to start. They were able to push numbers forward and really squeeze the game against Fluminense in a way that they just won't be able to do against PSG and probably won't be able to do in every Premier League game that they play. They will have to still press, but not be quite that intense. In possession, we saw a different setup from Enzo Maresca than we've seen at least at other times in this tournament. He's not reinventing any wheels here. But in possession, I clocked it as a 3-1-5-1 for Chelsea, where instead of it being Moises Caicedo and a partner at the base of midfield, it was just Moises Caicedo. And ahead of him, you had Enzo Fernandez in the left half space, Cole Palmer through the middle as like a pure 10, and then Christopher Nkunku as that right-sided attacking midfielder, with Pedro Neto providing the width all the way on the left side, and Malo Gusto doing the same on the right side. So you're one in that 3-1-5-1. The first one is Caicedo, and then you've got that attacking midfield trio flanked by 2 wide players, and then you had João Pedro up top as that number 9 who would drop in and link play. Although he didn't have to do a ton of that stuff because Nkunku and Palmer were trying to drop and do a bunch of that. It didn't yield to a ton of success, like I talked about in the last segment, because I don't think that Palmer and Nkunku really got into the game in possession because they were being marked out of it quite often by this Fluminense team. It didn't end up mattering, though, because transitions were the thing that decided this game. Chelsea did a great job of forcing turnovers. They did a really nice job of capitalizing on those turnovers. And when you've got João Pedro finishing at the clip that he did in this game, with that first goal, I know we talked about it already, but the way that he does absolutely just batter that thing, but he also guides it at the same time. It's one of those goals that is hit with such speed, but is also finessed at the exact same clip. And I really like those kinds of goals. He like just guides it into the top corner, but does it at a speed that like I could never. It's beautiful. And Chelsea did more than enough to get the job done in this game.
Graham, were there any other standout performers from you for Chelsea in this one, aside from João Pedro, or do you want to spend some more time talking about the debutant who scores 2 because he had a rest? What a shocking turn of events. A player who is rested and not exhausted and physically worn down can look sharp and good.
What a concept
right?
that is. I mean, he was gutted that he had to leave his beach to go to the Club World Cup until he heard that Michael Buffer was going to be doing the pre-match introductions, and that was the thing that he was ready to rumble.
He is a little bit of an institution, right? Like, I do think of in the American sporting landscape, if you've watched American sports spectacles, you've probably seen him at some point, right? I feel like Michael Buffer could do that, no?
I mean, he is the ultimate like sports announcing mercenary. Like, I feel like I see him at F1 races, and like obviously he's here. And does he still do boxing, or like does he do like Uber Eats commercials now?
It's a lot of UFC, I'm pretty sure. But
UFC.
Still some boxing. Boxing still exists, right? If you got him, and then I think it's Jim Ross who's famous for the like my God, that's the Undertaker's music. Like if you get him and Michael Buffer together, I think in like if you had a surprise cameo appearance, but when João Pedro is signed, you get oh my God, that's João Pedro's music coming out at halftime in the middle of a game, and we really covered all the bases here.
That's what they're going to do for the final. They're reserving that for the final. In terms of this tournament for Chelsea, like I think it's been a good tournament. Obviously, they've had a more favourable run than some of the other teams, and so they're going to have their biggest test by a million miles on Sunday, which is going to be difficult for them. But in terms of their evolution, like the attack for Chelsea was always going to be the next evolution for this team, because last season Maresca ball, it gave them a level of control in games, so their average possession share last season was the third highest in the Premier League. But 10th place Brentford scored more goals than them, and I know a lot of Chelsea fans thought they were a bit dull and easy to play against, despite the fact that a lot of their underlying creative numbers were pretty good, like third or fourth for pretty base level stuff like expected goals and shots on goal and stuff like that. But nonetheless, it was about finding those different dimensions in the attack. And this Club World Cup, I think, has been pretty useful for Chelsea. We've seen Maresca, he's sort of split the difference between using this as like a pre-season experience and also a competitive tournament, because Chelsea have already won $80 million at this competition. It'll be $104 million if they win on Sunday. Fun fact, João Pedro, in scoring those 2 goals, I think paid back roughly 45% of his transfer fee. So they anti-Trent Alexander-Arnold from this competition. So it's been useful in a number of ways for Chelsea. But Maresca, he's used this tournament to try different things. He's used Palmer out wide to then try and create space for switches. I think that's partly why Pedro Neto's had such a good tournament, because they've created space for him. Enzo Fernandez as well has had a decent tournament. Palmer has played a role in how he's creating space for him as well, in particular in that Benfica game in the round of 16 of the quarterfinals. In this game, it's Pedro dropping a little bit deeper, and Cuckoo's doing that as well. I didn't really expect to see Christopher Nkunku at this tournament. He apparently is on his way out of Chelsea. But I think that just speaks to how Maresca now seems to have a firmer grasp of the qualities of each player that he has and the range of options that he now has on that squad, and how he can adapt depending on the task. So if we're doing like stock up, stock down for teams coming out of this tournament, I'm stock up on Chelsea. I think they are becoming quite a strong team. Whether that's going to be, kind of manifest itself into a title challenge next season, that's quite a leap for them to make that kind of progression. But yeah, they're heading in the right direction, I think it's fair to say.
Obviously, they have plenty of talent. Do you have any concerns about losses of Nkunku, and maybe it's Noni Madueke, right, is the other one who's supposedly on the move?
I don't have any concerns about Nkunku, not because he's a bad player, just he has barely played a role outside the Conference League for this team. Madueke is an interesting one, because I would have said Madueke was one of the players. Chelsea have this strategy which we've spoken about at length over the last couple of years of like it's a very sort of like private equity led strategy of buying young, and if you buy enough young players with potential, like a couple of them are going to hit. Madueke, I would say, relatively speaking, is one of those players that has hit. He's become a first team figure for this team. But interestingly, maybe to make the model work, they need to sell some players at a profit who maybe aren't going to they're not going to move the needle that much to turn them into title winners, right? And I don't think Madueke is that good. So they can sell him, make a profit of €30 million, and that allows them to then go and find another Cole Palmer, who is the sort of player who turns them into a title winner. So I think it's indicative of their model. Does that, looking at that in isolation, does selling Madueke make them weaker? Yes, it probably does. But looking at the big picture, I think Chelsea have a clear idea of what their strategy is, and that sort of fits into that.
It is an odd one that with like that prize money, if Chelsea were to win the whole thing with all of their creative accounting, you would assume that they will put it to good use and somehow spend another $600 billion but not be in trouble. Whereas PSG, like I'm assuming they would like the prize money. I don't know if that's like essentially finding change in the couch cushions for them. So I'm not sure how much that's going to be the motivation for them. How do we see this final playing out? Is it going to be Chelsea defending a bit more and trying to be opportunistic in their counters? Is it going to be PSG possessing the ball and tiki-taking their way through? How much Kvaradana, mazy technical dribble that looks slightly out of control the entire time? How much of that are we going to get? What are our expectations for this final?
I think we'll see teams trade off spells of the ball. Like Graham detailed it well. Enzo Maresca wants Chelsea to be a ball-dominant team. Maresca talked about in that same post-match interview about how both PSG and Real Madrid play good soccer. He has an appreciation for both of them and what Luis Enrique in particular has been doing, because he's been there for quite some time now at PSG, long enough to make these changes that have turned them into an absolute juggernaut. He knows that PSG are going to have stretches of the ball, but he wants his team to have possession too. So we're going to see kind of like two boxers trading blows here, I would imagine. It just so happens that one boxer is better, like a lot better. What PSG do in terms of their ability to shift their midfielders around, to pull you apart, to create space, and that they're so flexible in basically every part of the field, it's incredible. And that was one of the biggest evolutions of the PSG team of this past season, right? The one that won Liga, the one that won the Champions League, that finally got past that hurdle. Their flexibility, especially in the front line, has become such an asset for this team. And we didn't actually even need to see a whole lot of flexibility in the front line in the win over Real Madrid, because that game was over in 10 minutes. But what this PSG team can do at their best is they can have players pop up in basically any part of the field. Dembele can rotate and shift from the 9 spot over to the wing, and you can have Kvardana go centrally, or Desiree Doué drop or move wider or move centrally, or Hakimi can play wide, or he can tuck into the half space, or Nuno Mendes can be a left center back and quite often is in possession, but is also maybe one of the world's absolute best overlapping left backs. And that's not even getting to the midfield, which is, I think, probably still the engine of this team and really the hub of so much of that positional fluidity. They're so hard to stop on the ball. They are not just a possession team, though, PSG. They're also a team that brings legit defensive effort. There's a moment, we mentioned Kvardana, there's a moment where he's trying to go 1v1 in the semis against Real Madrid. He loses the ball, and he puts his head down and tracks back like 8 yards, applies pressure, and wins it right back. And that contrast between PSG's effort and Kvaratskhelia's effort in that moment and Real Madrid's effort was so blinding in that game. It will not be nearly so blinding because Chelsea are like a real team that has some balance to them. But man, it is so difficult to bet against PSG at this stage because they do all the on-ball stuff almost as good as any team has ever done it in the history of this sport. And then they also try defensively and are really, really good at that stuff too. Yeah, I don't choose to bet against PSG at this stage.
Yeah, Chelsea are going to have trouble on both sides of the ball. So they were doing some interesting stuff against Fluminense where Arias was getting passed on to Caicedo, Tosin and Chalobah were like taking it on turns to pass Arias on to each other, and Arias is such an important part of the way that Fluminense play. And I thought that was actually a good piece on The Athletic by Ahmed Walid on this entire kind of out of possession structure employ from Chelsea. It's one thing doing that against Arias and Fluminense. It's another thing trying to do that against like PSG and Ousmane Dembele and Desiree Doué and Kvaradona. That's just going to be an entirely different level. And then out of possession as well. I mean, you go through the teams Chelsea have played, and I mentioned that they've had a favourable run, and they have. LAFC, Flamengo, Esperance, Palmeiras, Benfica and Fluminense. It's not just the quality of the teams that they've played there. It's the fact that the only team in that entire run that has pressed them was Flamengo, and Chelsea crumbled in that game. Chelsea did not deal with that task very well, and they were really poor, and Flamengo beat them convincingly. So that does not bode well for the challenge that Chelsea are going to face in this game.
Do you want to try a scoreline prediction, Graham?
3-1 PSG. I think they'll have enough Chelsea in quick transition to pose some form of threat. So I can see them scoring, but PSG they're just frightening. They're just a million miles ahead of anyone else in the world at this point, and I think they're going to have the trophy to prove it.
And Joe, I know you don't love a scoreline prediction, so my question for you is this. The over-under, if he is there on Michael Buffer's Let's Get Ready to Rumble, if he delivers it, is it over or under 4 seconds total?
Long over.
Okay,
smashing the over.
Joe's
could not do anything else but smash the over.
All right. Any other thoughts on the final or on the Club World Cup so far before we call this one reviewed and previewed simultaneously?
Just a great idea to have these games at MetLife, which has no roof, no shade for anyone. Not just the players. Nobody in that stadium is going to get shade on Sunday.
Also, no soul, no character.
That
no
too.
Spirit, and no easy access. So should be lovely.
Club World
Should be
Cup.
lovely. Yay! I can't wait. It is, to go back to that one, it's a strange one in that it has been enjoyable at times, and it's been fun to see different styles and different teams that we wouldn't otherwise get to watch. And so in that way, it's been a success. It just also feels like maybe it should be played in the winter with fewer teams. And suddenly it's like, I don't know where we are on this one, because that's what they moved away from. I don't know how we make this work. but I feel like we're going to get it again. Until we do, we get a final that will be quite a bit of fun, and we will certainly be back to discuss in the future. For now, Graham Ruthven, thank you for all of your Club World Cup thoughts.
Thank you, Taylor Rockwell.
Joe Lowery, thank you for joining us for the entirety of this review instead of being on the beach for the first half and then in and performing well for the second half.
Yeah, the beach trip didn't quite come together. That's all right. We'll get up next summer.
Yeah, you went the opposite way to a landlocked state with no beaches anywhere nearby.
Yeah, Joe doesn't want any more sand on
no.
vacation.
No. Yeah, that's a good point. Joe's surrounded by sand, only drinks boiling water. That's been established.
Graham, I gotta get you to Arizona sometime because we have like zero sand.
Don't ruin my illusion, Joe. I have fun with my illusion.
You're right. It was great. Lots
you
of
have
sand.
zero sand in Arizona?
We don't have zero sand. We're not a sandy desert. Like there's other kinds of deserts.
Is this like when Joe claimed that there were no tumbleweeds in Arizona?
No, we totally
what I'm
had
hearing.
tumbleweed.
Okay.
And then what? Then one rolled behind him in his background.
I've been got. Blast. Curse you, tumbleweed.
Oh, it's funny because it might have actually happened. Listeners, thank you all so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again very soon.